Hi, it's Meredydd here. For this video we're going to do something a bit different. Instead of a short tutorial about a specific part of Anvil, I'm going to build a complete application and you're going to watch me build it in real time. I'm going to build an application that keeps track of your stock market portfolio. You can set up a list of stocks, see their prices, and keep notes on your investments. It's a subscription service charged monthly to your credit card. This will bring together a lot of things: data storage, accessing external APIs, user accounts, card payments, and more. You'll be watching me build this application for the first time, so I'm working it out as I go along. If you want to jump around, there's a table of contents above or below this video. Let's get started. We can begin by just plotting a chart of a stock price. So the first thing to do is to get the stock prices. There is an API called the IEX API that's available for anyone to use right on the internet. And from it you can get chart data. So for example, a 1-year history of the Apple stock. And this is what you get. It's in JSON format. And each element is going to be a dictionary with a date and a closing price. Okay, so if we just plot the closing price by date, we will have our stock chart. Stick a panel on here, stick a chart on here. Anvil has full plotting support using the popular Plotly API. So all we need to do is get that data and send it up here and plot it. I'm going to make a server module to get the data. This is so that the code that's getting it, accessing the API is trusted. Just in case you were using a different API that required authentication, you didn't really want that happening on the client side. So we make a server function, pass in a particular symbol, and then it returns the result of a request to this API, substituting the actual preferred symbol in there. We don't need any username and password, but we are going to want to interpret the results as JSON. Okay, so that's what it takes to access an external API. Now in this code, as it loads, this is the constructor, so it runs when the code opens. We want to fetch that information. Get stock price let's start with Apple stock. And we're going to plot it using the Plotly API. So we just set self.plot1.data to be a scatter plot, where the x's are, so for point in the price data, we want to take the date for the x-axis, and we want to get the close price. That's right, close, yes. And for a little bit of nicer presentation, we'll fill to 0 in the y direction. Okay, let's run this. And we have fetched and plotted the stock price for Apple shares over the last year or so. Okay, so far so good. Now so far so good. We're accessing an external API and we're pulling that data back and turning it into a sort of mini dashboard. Now let's turn this into a multi-user application. So we're going to have users logging in and seeing a list of their own stocks and being able to pull up the prices for one of those stocks. So we're going to need to store some information on the server, so we add the data table service. In fact, we're going to need user accounts as well, so let's add the users service. So we'll allow people to sign in with email and password, and we're going to remember logins for up to 30 days. I'm going to add a user account for myself to make life easy. enabled. Yeah, let's turn off sign up and confirmation. Okay, so I can reset my password. Oops. Okay, so I've just created a user account for myself. Okay, so we have users, and we also need to record the stocks that each user has in their portfolio. So we're going to have the stock symbol in this column and then link it to the user. Maybe allow the user to make some notes about each stock as well. So let's put some sample data in here. So I am interested in Apple stock. Okay, and I have some notes. And let's add one more. Also interested in Alphabet stock. Okay, so we've now created our database, and we've also inserted some sample data, so we can concentrate on displaying it first, and then we will get as far as editing it. So we want to create a new form that users see when they first log in. So this will be the home page, and this will be the stock chart. Okay. So when the user logs in, we're going to show them a list of all their existing stocks. So put a panel on here, and we're going to put a repeating panel here. It's going to be displaying rows from the stocks table. And let's see, we'll have our ticker symbol over here in bold, and have it display the symbol column in its text property. And then over here we'll have the company name. Oh, that's not in the data table. Let's add that. Okay, so now if we go to the stock chart... Oh, sorry, it was to the home page, wasn't it? Yes, that's right. We can bind this to the company name. Okay, actually, what we want is to be able to click on these symbols and go to the stock chart. So actually, I'm going to replace this symbol label with a symbol link so that it can react when clicked on. Okay, we can bind the text on this to the symbol and give it an icon. Okay. So this is the stock repeating panel. And we just need to set its items to a list of rows from the stocks table, and it will display them. So let's write a server function that gets a list of all the stocks for the currently logged in user. Of course, we could do users.getUser, and then if there is nobody logged in, then we raise an exception because unauthenticated users should not be allowed to run this function. Now, in practice, this is a piece of boilerplate we're going to want on a lot of our functions, so I'm going to factor it out into a function called ensureUser. And it's going to get the current user. If that user is none, nobody's logged in, raise an exception. Otherwise, return that user. Okay, so I can now do me is ensureUser. There we go. Okay, and now we can return all the stocks in the stock table, or the search, where the user is me. Okay. Now, bear in mind, me here, me is actually a row from the users table. So you can access all its columns, but you can use the row object when searching for linked rows like this. So I pass the whole record of my user in as the search for the users column to pull out rows where that column's linked to my username. Okay, so we've got a function that gets the stocks of the currently logged in user. Now we just want to make the user actually log in. So when we go to the home page, see, while nobody is logged in, we do login with form. So that will just keep popping up a login form until somebody's logged in, but it'll let people straight through if somebody's already logged in, i.e. they've ticked remember me. And if they have logged in, then the items for the stock repeat is going to be filled out by that get my stocks call. So that's going to get all those stock records that refer to me and stick them into stock repeat. So I need to, that's got the stock chart as a startup form, so we need to set that. Right. Log in with the username and passwords I created for myself. Okay, good. So I have these stock prices, these stock symbols and their company names. Of course, nothing happens when I click on them, so let's fix that. We want to open this stock chart every time we click on one of these. So when I double click on the symbol link, or I can select its click event. So this is when you click on that link. This is code that's executing inside the item template. This is the actual form that gets repeated within that repeating panel. And so within this form, we've actually got self.item as this row in the items table, this element in the repeating panel, which means that we could use that. So in this case, we're going to open the stock chart form, and then we're going to set its item property to self.item. So you've already seen the item property in the context of a repeating panel. If we open the item template in a repeating panel, you can see that it's got this item property. In this case, the autocompleter knows it's a stocks row. But you can also do this for top-level forms. I'm going to drop us a hint that this is in fact a row from the stocks table for the autocompleter. Which means that now in the code, we can move this from being hard-coded to getting the price for the symbol referred to in this item, which we've been passed in from this link. So now, click on the link and pull up the Apple stock chart. Okay, we're going to want a home link as well, so you can get back. Okay, and when this is clicked, when we click this link, we use open form again to open the home page. Okay, right, so we now have a multi-user application that lets you log in and view your portfolio, pull up a stock chart for any of the stocks in that portfolio, and then navigate back to the home screen. That's all very nice, but of course we can't actually add or remove any stocks from our portfolio, and we can't edit that notes field. So now we're going to build a commonly known as a CRUD app. It's a create, read, update, delete application. So we've got reading part down pat. We can show a list, we can click through to it. First things first, we need to be able to add a new stock. So let's put a text box in here for you to enter the stock. and button for you to add it. Okay. Right, so when you click this button, what are we going to do? Well, we need to first check that that's a valid stock and then add it to our list. And again, this is trusted code, so we should do it on the server. Right. Again, make sure we are logged in. I'm going to pass a symbol in here. Okay, so we need to check whether the symbol is something that we know about. The easiest way to do this is to request the price of it and see if it returns successfully. So we're going to try getting the response, and then if we get an anvil.http error, then we know that that request failed, and that's probably because that stock quote doesn't exist. So okay, so in this case, that's going to return none. Otherwise, we know that quote does exist because it succeeded. Prove the actual symbol, I think. In fact, we want to query for the HTTP encoded version of that symbol, don't we? URL escape. Just in case. Okay. Right. So now, if that request succeeded, that means that that symbol is a valid symbol, so we can add it. Oh, see, we should also check whether we already have that symbol in our application, in our portfolio rather. So we can do if there is a row where the user is this currently logged in user and the symbol is the symbol, then we also return none. And finally, if none of those things were the case, then we return apptables.stocks.addRow. So we can set the symbol to be the symbol, user to be the currently logged in user, company name. Ooh, we can fetch the company name from the IEX API. We can get, there we go, stock company. In fact, let's request that instead. And company name. Okay, so company name is the company name we've just got there, and the notes will start out being an empty string. And that's it. Well, we can return that value, which is going to be non-none. So we can call add stock now, and it's going to enforce all these data integrity constraints. So on our home page, when this button's clicked, we go anvil.server.call, add stock, we pass in as the symbol, we go stock symbol, let's call it this new symbol box, I think that's a better name. Symbol box text, and then Right, and that will return a stock row if it succeeds. And if stock row is none, then we can alert and say that that's an invalid stock, or you already have it in your portfolio. Otherwise, we will clear that text box, and we can open the stock chart for that stock row. Okay. Oh. Oh yes, that HTTP request failed. Let's try this again. There we go, and we now are on the page for the Microsoft stock. And it's new. If we look back here, it's now on our list. Let's check that random garbage does not get accepted. There we go, invalid stock symbol, or you already have it in your portfolio. Oh, none type does not support indexing. Ah, yes, okay, so it looks like we opened the stock chart form anyway, and then of course it tried to get something off the item. Ah, yes. So if the stock row is none, then we return bailout. This is important. If you put error handling code in here, you should test the error handling code as well as the successful case. There we go. Okay, let's go to these pages now. So we can create new stocks in our portfolio, and we should be able to display information about them or update them or remove them. So let's display a bit more information because this page is really darn sparse. Remember, self to item is our stocks row here, so we can do things like having a label up here that is the symbol. Let's have the symbol up at the top here and the company name in the big text here. Okay. So now what we want to do, we probably want to have some notes. Let's have another card for our notes. Again, we can just bind this to the notes column. And now we need to be able to edit or delete. Let's start out with deleting this stock. So remove. So let's have a button here to okay, so we now have a button that removes this stock from our portfolio. Let's label it as a little bit more concerning. White on red should do it. There we go. Okay. So, what do we want to do when this button gets clicked? Well, the first thing we want to do is be sure that this is actually something the user meant. So we can use the confirm alert to say so with give the company name. And the symbol. If that returns true, then, okay, again we're going to want the data tables thing to delete the stock record. As long as the actual user for the stock row is the currently logged in user, then we can delete this row from the stocks table. Okay, so if we confirm that prompt, then we can do anvil.server.call, and we can remove this stock, which is called self.item, and then we can open the home page, because we don't want to stay on the page for stock that's been deleted. Okay, so far we can do deletion. Let's try that out. Take Microsoft and remove it from our portfolio. There we go, and it's gone. Okay, so we can do creation, we can do deletion. Finally, let's do update. This notes column is a little bit empty at the moment. So we have two options here. We could replace this label with a text area and bind that straight to the notes column. This is the fastest way of doing something, doing update. This is a data binding with write back. So every time you change the text here, whenever you leave the text box, it will write that value straight back to self.item notes. So to demonstrate, we can go to Google, and you can see it's showing the text we've already entered in that notes column. I'm going to add another trite observation. Ooh! Can't write in table stocks from client code. Ah, yes. Okay, and this is the problem with direct write back. You need write permission on the row right there in the client side. We have not given you write permission on the rows that have been sent back, but there's no reason we couldn't. So yes, when the app table stocks search. So instead of returning all these stocks rows where the user is me, but returning them. So by returning them, we give the client read access to these rows, but we don't give them write access unless they have it in the data table's permissions. We can deliberately give them write access. So we can take stocks, and when we can take a client writable view of all the rows in that table, filtered by the user column must be this logged in user, and then if we search that, we'll get a list of client writable rows instead. Okay. And if we look, we go home, we've actually stored that data in the database and we're loading it back out again. So again, we've now created a create, read, update, delete application that lets us manage our portfolios and view stock charts in a very short space of time. I'm going to pause for a moment and put some bells and whistles on this. First things first, when we're just editing notes, and that's perfectly fine, but by the time you're editing lots of things about a record, it's often a little bit visually untidy to have all the edit boxes right there on the form. And you probably want to pop up some kind of editing interface where you can make changes and then hit OK or cancel. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to allow ourselves to edit both the notes on this stock in our portfolio and also the name by which we refer to the company. So to do this, we're going to make a separate form that we can use to edit one of these stock rows. And then we're going to pop it up using an Anvil alert. Let's show you. So make a form and call it edit stock. Let's remove the output to give ourselves a bit more space. Okay, so the stock symbol we're going to say is not going to be editable. Right, so the item on this is going to be a table, the row from the stocks table. So we can say that the symbol is going to be up there, and then we can edit the name we give this stock using a text box. This is going to be bound to the company name column. Okay, and now we can have some notes. These are going to be in this text area. Let's make these a bit closer together. No spacing underneath it. No spacing above this one either. There we go. Okay. It's going to be an auto-expanding area called notes area. Okay, so this page is data bound. So this form will happily display and edit a row from the stocks table. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop an edit stock window instance up from the stock chart. So instead of having the notes as a text area here, I'm going to have the notes as a read-only label. That displays that notes row, and then I'm going to have a button down here for editing them. Give it a pencil icon. Oh, want that icon. Okay, put it over on the right. Call this the edit button. Okay, so when the edit button gets clicked, we're going to create a new instance of the edit stock form and then use it in alert. So we need to import that class. And so we can make a new edit stock instance and set its item property to the item of self.item, which is this row from the stocks table. And then we can use an alert to display that you can pass any component into the alert. And it will be shown in a pop-up. So let's try it. Select Google. Edit my notes on this. Oh, and you see we haven't actually refreshed anything here because we didn't actually update the label. So once we've done that, we go self.refresh data bindings, which will reevaluate all those data bindings and update the page. Let's delete that extra facetious comment, and everything is updated. Great, okay, so we've created a create, read, update, delete application that allows people to manage their stocks. We could do a lot more and be a lot more sophisticated here, but let's move on. We want to turn this into a commercial application, so we want to charge every user who uses it monthly for the privilege of access. So this is the software as a service, or SaaS model. To charge people for access, you're going to want the Stripe service. This allows us to accept credit card payments with Stripe. You can set up an account easily and straight away through Anvil. As it is, we're going to use our existing account. Okay, so we're now signed in to our demo Stripe account. It's in test mode. And this allows us to charge people money using Stripe. So first things first, on this home page, we don't want to log people straight into the main menu if they're not a valid account. So we need to store with the users, as well as all this other information, we're going to store a Stripe customer ID. And we're going to have we're going to direct people to a page that collects their credit card information if they want to continue using this service. So let's make that page. Okay, let's put a little bit of informational text in here. Obviously, if you were preparing a real commercial application, you'd put a little bit more thought and care into the wording of persuading people to the right things. Okay. So now on the, let's make this called the payment page. So now on the home page, if we've logged in, but the user does not have a valid Stripe identifier, in fact, yes, we're going to need to check this from the server, aren't we? So we'll make a server function that checks whether a user is a valid subscriber. Okay. Right, so if this user, if there is a user logged in and the Stripe customer ID is not none, now, so those are the basic things that obviously cause us not to be true and not to want to return true. We want to check with Stripe. So we can go anvil.stripe and we can get the customer associated with this particular customer ID. So we retrieve their customer record from Stripe. And now we need to or check whether our subscription is there. So, because on this customer, we can do things like getting the IDs of all the live subscriptions. So let's create a subscription for ourselves. Let's go to test mode. Okay, subscriptions. Plans. We can create a new subscription plan, which is the SaaS Demo 1 plan. And we're going to say it's priced in US dollars, and it is $50 a month. Okay, that was all we needed to create a subscription plan in Stripe. And now we can just check whether this plan is in the is registered for the customer. So we can just return true if the SaaS demo plan. Was that what we called it? SaaS Demo 1. If SaaS Demo 1 is in get subscription IDs, pass true for live only. So we get all those subscription IDs for all the live subscriptions on this customer, and if SaaS Demo 1 is in that list, then we return true, otherwise false. So now on the home page, when we've logged in, we check whether the user is a valid subscriber. And if they are not a paying subscriber, we're doing it at the wrong time. Yes, so we can't actually do the change of form here. We're going to have to come in via the login page. Okay, so let's actually rename this from the payment page to the login page, and we're going to make this the startup form. So this is going to be the payment panel, which we only show. Payment panel, which is invisible by default, and we only show if they are not a paying user. Okay, so all this logic from the home page now has to move to the login page. So we start here, we open the login page, and when the login page shows, we don't do this in the constructor, because when the constructor fires, this page has not yet been displayed, and we want to run this code after this page is displayed, so we can navigate to a different one if we need to. So when it's showed, we log in with form, and then we call this server function to find out whether they are a paying subscriber. And if they are, then we can go straight to opening the home page. And if they are not, then we have to show the payment panel. Okay, so when this panel is shown, it's got a pay button on it. And when this pay button is clicked, we want to collect their credit card information, then send it back to the server and use it to create a new Stripe customer for that user. So, when the button's clicked, we use Stripe checkout to get a token, not to charge the user immediately, but to get a token for $50 US. See. We don't need billing address. We do want a title for this, which is Stock Tracker Subscription. Okay, and if we look at the documentation, get token returns a token, a tuple of token and user details. Okay. So it will throw an exception if it fails, and if it doesn't fail, then we are good to go. So we want to send this token and user details back to the server. and use that to set up a new customer. Right, okay, so we can use anvil.stripe to create a new customer with the email address from user details and the token from this token, the token we got from the checkout. And we can take, oh yes. Okay, so I'm actually going to do the check for a valid logged in user here, because I'm not going to reuse ensure user, because in a moment we're going to upgrade ensure user to also ensure that the user is paying, to make sure they can't access any of these this other functionality unless they're a paying user. So we do whether they're logged in check manually. Okay, okay, if the currently logged in user is not none, we make a new customer, and then we set the Stripe customer ID to the ID column from this customer. The customer is just a Stripe customer object if you're used to this. Right, and now we can add a subscription, a new subscription to this customer. And the plan ID is, what do we say earlier? SaaS Demo 1. Okay, so we check we have a logged in user, then we create a new customer from that email address they gave us and the token that was derived from their credit card. We make a new subscription, and then we save that customer ID in our table. Okay, and we're going to return true when that happens. Actually, no, this should be assumed to succeed because it will throw an exception if it doesn't. Okay. Yes, so let's make sure it does return an exception. That should never happen because, of course, we should never call this code except when we're logged in. Okay, so we're in the login page. We're in the pay button, click handler. We've got our token and user details. We can now do anvil.server.call to set up a new subscription using this token and the user details we just got. And again, if this didn't throw an exception, it succeeded. So we can open the form to the home page because we are now a paying user. Okay, let's make sure those this functionality that's accessible from the home page. In fact, no, let's check it's working first. So, notice, by the way, this happened straight away. that I logged in, it remembered that I was logged in, and that I have none in my Stripe customer ID, so I'm not a paying customer yet. So it invites me to click the pay button. So we're in the test mode, so we can use the Stripe test cards. Okay. So we've paid, and we are now being allowed into the application. And if I run the application again, I will now register as a paying user and be allowed straight through. Speaking of which, we still haven't protected ensure user to make sure that it's always a paying user. Now we could be pretty naive here. We could go. We could take the Stripe customer ID from the currently logged in user and check it against the Stripe API every time we call ensure user, which means every time we call one of these server functions. But that's going to hit the Stripe API pretty hard. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to use the server session to save whether this user's logged in. So Anvil.server.session is a dictionary type object. In fact, yes. What we can do here is we can say we can just set this to be true if this check succeeds. So, whenever we check it, we start out resetting it as false. And we move it through to true. Okay. So now we can look up that variable in the session. And that will have been set by the isPayingSubscriber call, which we should have done when we first logged in, so this should always work. You notice I have been a little bit cavalier about exception handling, and that is obviously something you'd want to sharpen up if you're moving beyond a prototype, but the important thing here is safety. If you get it wrong, you'll get an exception is thrown that you don't know how to handle, you'll end up with a little red box in the corner or an error output, but you won't accidentally allow somebody access to something they shouldn't. So here we have it. We have built a software as a service recurring subscription-based stock tracking application. It can do create, reads, update, deletes, it supports multiple customers, and we did it all in a remarkably short period of time. Thank you very much for watching. The link to clone this application so you can play with it yourself and look through the source code is available underneath this video.